where our payroll professionals get their value is, how they handle the exceptions. And so we design the system to be around payroll by exception. And what that allows the payroll professionals to do is they can focus on the areas where they're really able to show their skills and practice their craft, and not spend hundreds of hours, with timesheets and report generation and clicking buttons. That they're things that computers are really good at. The thing that computers aren't so great at is understanding what do we do with someone that's got a bonus and now popped up over the AE threshold, and what do we do with that? So, and the payroll professionals are really great at handling those types of scenarios. So that's really where I think automation will lead us, is allowing payroll professionals to be better at the payroll processing and letting computers take care of the things that people don't really want to do anyway.
Welcome to the Payroll Podcast with your host, Nick Day. Find out what it takes to truly discover what it takes to elevate your career within payroll as we meet with the industry leaders who are shaping the industry for tomorrow.
Hello and welcome back to the Payroll Podcast. My name is Nick Day, CEO of JJ Recruitment Group, and we are special international payroll recruiters. Now, if you do need any support with a payroll vacancy, please do get in touch with any of my team. And of course, if you are passionate about payroll, please do share this podcast with all of your friends or your family and all your colleagues, because together we can help raise the profile of payroll globally. Now, today, I'm really excited to be introducing you all to Phil Burney to the show. Phil is co-founder of KeyPay. They're a cloud-based international payroll solution. And today, we're going to be discussing everything to do with payroll automation. And it's a subject that I think is still pretty much misunderstood by many. So hopefully we're going to get to the bottom of what payroll automation is and why it's so important we understand it completely as we move into the future of payroll. Phil personally believes that payroll is far too precious to be left entirely to the robots. Hallelujah, I'm sure you're all going to be saying, we know that the people in payroll are more important than ever, which is why one of KeyPay's goals is to make what could be a gargantuan task into something stress-free. So in this episode of the Payroll Podcast, Phil Burney explains to me the importance of using cloud technology in the future of payroll, the importance of compliance, and we even have a little bit of a chit-chat about what the new Prime Minister could mean for payroll professionals. So without further ado, let me welcome Phil Burney, co-founder of KeyPay, to the Payroll Podcast. How are you feeling today, Phil?
Well, great, Nick. Thanks for having me. It's quite the introduction. I'm actually quite excited to listen to the podcast now myself.
Fantastic. Well, I know you're an avid listener. We've talked about previous episodes in the past, so you know what question's going to come from me first, and that is this. Yep. What does the word payroll mean to you?
Probably a bit of a different one for me. I tend to think of payroll as opportunity. I think there's so many opportunities within payroll to not just improve processes and improve the way that data flows through the systems, but I think there's also a lot of opportunities for employees that I think a lot of the current systems, aren't really well placed to capitalise on. So for me, I think that we've progressed a long way from how we were doing things, even 10, 15, 20 years ago. But for me, I look at all of the opportunities that are available to us down the track and, particularly focusing on what that means for employees. So it's about opportunity. And obviously, for myself personally, payroll's presented a lot of opportunities that I never really expected to come across in my career. So yes, I really do look at it as a way to open up lots of opportunities.
Fantastic. Couldn't agree more. I think a recent study that we did with the CRPP here in the UK was to really talk about the fact there's over 60 career pathways now in the world of payroll, and I'm sure there are going to be more to come. But let's talk a little bit about your pathway then. You said opportunities have presented themselves in a way that perhaps you didn't expect. Tell listeners a little bit more about how you came into the world of payroll, and of course, a little bit perhaps about the KeyPay solution for those that aren't familiar.
Yeah, so I had a bit of a non-traditional path into payroll. Listening to your guests on past podcasts, it seemed there is no traditional path into payroll. Correct. Everyone has a different journey into payroll. So, yes, I actually started as a software developer. I'm a computer nerd by trade. I started in Australia in the superannuations industry and got involved in payroll through my business partner, Richard McLean, who I think you've had on the podcast previously as well. And, Rich and I worked together for a number of years, and Rich was just constantly saying to me, we should build a payroll solution. And at the time, I thought, Rich, that's a bit crazy. I don't think it's something we can just knock over in a weekend. But through a range of circumstances, I changed roles. I had a fairly long commute. Rich was also changing roles. He was doing some IT consulting, and we were working together on various projects. I thought, I've got 4 hours every day on the train. I was commuting 2 hours each way. that's a fair amount of time. I'd watch pretty much everything on. There was no Netflix at the time. This was 10 years ago. So I thought, we can give this payroll thing a crack. And so we built the first version of KeyPay, nearly 10 years, actually over 10 years ago now. I showed it to Rich. He said he felt like he could sell it. He managed to convince someone to run payroll on it. They said it was absolutely terrible. It was the worst system they used, I think, was the feedback that they gave us. But the thing was, they gave us lots of feedback on it. And we slowly built and implemented that over time. We got my co-founders, Paul and Christian, as well involved. And over the last 10 years, we've built KeyPay to be one of the leading cloud-based payroll systems in. We started in Australia, we've moved to the UK, we're now in Singapore, Malaysia and New Zealand, and business continues to grow really well in all of those regions. So that's how I ended up in payroll. Certainly didn't start off there, but it's been a really amazing journey to see just how different the industry's gone in just the last 10 years that I've been involved with it.
Fantastic. Well, it sounds to me like you've been using computers for decades yourself in terms of the work that you've done developing that first payroll system. We know that people have been using computers to do payroll for decades. But in recent years, we've really seen technology advance considerably. Like, it's been phenomenal for me. Even when I came into payroll recruitment, people were using, cards and systems like Kalamazoo. And now there's a wealth of different options out there for people that really do specialize in certain areas. Why do you think we're trusting computers now to do more and more of the payroll process?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I actually think that the funny thing about computers doing more of the payroll process is it actually hasn't changed. What we're using the computers for hasn't changed a lot in the last 10 years. I think the big difference is actually the transition to the cloud. And what that's allowing us to do is connect a lot of systems together, and that's where the automation is coming from. So we can have timesheet systems connected to our payroll systems, our rota systems connected to our payroll system, the payroll system connected to reporting and to employee portals and our accounting systems. And so when we're talking about what the payroll system does, it's doing a lot of the same things as what it's been doing for the last 10 years. But where the real power from the automation is really coming from is connecting all of the other parts of the payroll process. A lot of it happens well before payday, and connects it to that payroll system, and then helps that information flow through. So I think the big difference is what we're trusting our payroll systems to do is to orchestrate that flow of information from, the very first point of, onboarding an employee right through to, having payment files or, with open banking payment information sent straight to the bank, reports sent to clients, and all of those process automated. So it's really interesting when you think about it. It's the actual core of payroll is very much the same. What we've gotten a lot better at is connecting all of the pieces of Lego to allow that information to flow through. With that movement of data comes a high level of trust, and I think that's really the bit that we're allowing the systems to take over a lot more.
Thinking about the sales side of things now, are there still a lot of payroll departments out there that haven't adopted the cloud? For me, that would seem like something that I would have thought most functions would have already adapted to and moved towards. I don't know the market well enough to know how many of there are out there that perhaps haven't made that change yet.
Yeah, I think there's certainly a large part of the industry that haven't moved to cloud systems and are still using either desktop or hybrid systems where it's a desktop system on a Citrix server or something on those lines. I think the big shift is, whereas, when I first started in the UK or when I started in Australia, I think the shift is that whereas people were content to stay on those systems maybe even as much as 5 years ago, I think with COVID and the changes in the industries around payroll, there's definitely a push towards moving to the cloud and cloud adoption, and a lot more interest. And, if you compare industries side by side, if you look at what's happened in the accounting industry and you look at what's happened in the payroll industry, it's phenomenal to see the push into the accounting industry into the cloud that the accounting industry's had. And by comparison, I don't know that the payroll industry is there yet, but there is definitely a groundswell of momentum that's pushing towards that cloud-based setup.
So I'm hearing from you that it sounds like the payroll industry is moving in the right direction, which is positive. But interestingly, you said in your previous response that one of the barriers potentially to cloud-based adoption is trust. We know the world, the pandemic has changed the world, right? And we know that from a payroll perspective, historically, they were always told they couldn't work from home. It's an office-based position. They were forced to work from home, which presumably, hopefully, has improved the level of trust between key stakeholders and the world of payroll, and the fact that they can operate in a remote environment. Has that really improved the adoption of cloud-based technologies as well? Has that trust? Have you seen that trust improve?
Yeah, I think it's certainly opened up people's minds to the possibility that you could move to a cloud-based system. I think one of the challenges we've also had is that payroll has always been seen as computationally heavy, process heavy, and it was one of those things where people didn't necessarily believe that it could be done in the cloud. The cloud was more for moving data around, but if you wanted to do the actual process and heavy data crunching, you needed that to be on a desktop system. I think people with the adoption of cloud-based with COVID, but also with the advances in technology with things like AWS infrastructure and cloud infrastructure with Azure and other setups like that, people have seen that robust computational intensity can be replicated in the cloud, and they're more willing to trust that they're not going to be waiting 4.5 hours on a Friday to get all of the payroll reports pushed out, and you can benefit from spreading that load across data centers that take up football fields, and everyone's a lot more comfortable with that. So I think two things have happened. Yeah, everyone is more comfortable that cloud has the capacity to do what they need to do, and COVID has given everyone the confidence that we can do our jobs remotely, and it's not going to be end of the world.
Brilliant. So something that's been quite interesting, and not just the pandemic, I don't want to focus on that, but we saw legislation change really quickly in the pandemic with furlough legislation being changed almost every second minute, it felt like, here in the UK, and I'm sure it was the same globally. But also recently in the UK, we've got a new Prime Minister, we've already had a new mini budget, so to speak, with different legislation, things changing, cost of living bits changing, national insurance changing, so on and so forth. How does automation respond to such a rapidly changing legal environment? So, for example, the large national insurance changes in the UK this year that's just happened, do you have to stay up all night trying to make those changes, or what's the situation from an automation perspective from your side?
It is actually interesting, and it does present some unique challenges. One of the things that I guess is unique from when you're a cloud provider is that the version of code that you push out is the version that all of your clients get. So when we do an update, everyone gets that update, which can be both a blessing and a curse. More often than not, it's a blessing because it means our clients don't have to worry about making sure they're running on the right version, getting the latest updates, installing and patching them, and all those types of things. But it does mean that we have to be on top of those things. And I know our payroll compliance team that's working through the changes that have come out at the moment. Yeah, they will probably have a lot of late nights and long weeks ahead to get that out. It is, I guess, part of the nature of working in payroll. But I think the really interesting thing about automation is because we have all of our clients working on, they're able to receive those updates at the same time in a uniform way. We're actually able to focus on the solution. We don't have to worry about all of those other headaches that come out with making downloads available, making sure that they've got the right operating system, making sure that they've got all of these other thousands of other variables that we can't control, because we're able to deliver it in a uniform way to all of our clients. That part of automation and, relying on the cloud infrastructure to deliver that to our clients creates a really unique experience. And we often get asked, how do we install the latest updates onto our system? And you can see the light bulbs always turn on when you say, you don't have to do anything. It will just be there for you. Yeah. And once people realise that, it removes a huge barrier to adoption for a lot of our clients.
Yeah, I can imagine. Such a time saver as well for those. Let's be honest, updates can take time, and it's one of those things you don't feel should be in necessarily your remit as a payroll professional, other things to focus on. So knowing it's just done is a great. But what it does lead me to ask the question, it's a question we get all the time, particularly in recruitment, when they ask me about my opinions on automation is, automation is growing. We're seeing automation be implemented across the payroll cycle. And as the payroll cycle gets more complicated, we're seeing more and more automation be implemented as well. People often ask, does so much automation risk payroll professionals long-term being out of a job? How do you see the role of the payroll professional changing in light of all this automation being implemented?
It's an interesting question. I get asked it all the time. I think what it actually enables, though, is people to automate the parts of the job, which, quite frankly, the feedback I get on the bits that we automate is the parts of the job that they don't like. So lots of parts that we automate are the timesheet entry, the pay run changes, the onboarding from employees. So things like being able to send an employee a self-setup link, they can enter all their information directly in the system, and that automatically gets entered into the payroll system, and it's ready for them to process. What that means is that people are able to actually focus on their payroll skills and not on their data entry skills, because no one really enjoys the data entry part. What they really enjoy is when you have a client that is working through re-enrollment of all of their employees because they've hit the re-enrollment threshold, being able to do that really quickly and efficiently and be confident that it's accurate, and what they're able to focus on is the exceptions. So we have this concept that we always try and focus on, which is where our payroll professionals get their value is how they handle the exceptions. And so we design the system to be around payroll by exception. And what that allows the payroll professionals to do is they can focus on the areas where they're really able to show their skills and practice their craft, and not spend hundreds of hours, with timesheets and report generation and clicking buttons. That they're things that computers are really good at. The thing that computers aren't so great at is understanding what do we do with someone that's got a bonus and now popped up over the AE threshold, and what do we do with that? So, and the payroll professionals are really great at handling those types of scenarios. So that's really where I think automation will lead us, is allowing payroll professionals to be better at the payroll processing and letting computers take care of the things that people don't really want to do anyway.
Sure. No, I think this is actually one of the most exciting changes we've seen in the world of payroll, right? It's allowing automation, I believe, is allowing payroll professionals to really now drive value, which has never necessarily been something they've been tasked with in the past. Whether that's strategic value, whether that's efficiency changes, whatever it might be, but they can really focus on where they can add value using their skill sets and things like that, which I think is really, really exciting. It's been a real cultural shift in the world of payroll. And they shouldn't fear automation. It's automation that's allowing these things to happen, which I think is wonderful. But one thing I'd love to ask, right? So I went to the recent annual conference here in the UK, and I always ask the question to payroll professionals, when was the last time you took a holiday? And particularly with what they've been through over the last 48 months, so many payroll professionals have been unable to take a break. They feel like if they go, payroll might fall down, they're needed, particularly those running in sole role environments where they are solely responsible for that payroll operation. So the question I've got for you now, I guess, is if automation is done well enough, could a payroll person, in theory, take a holiday and let the pay go out without monitoring, without checking, or we're still not quite there yet?
Have you ever asked yourself, how can I recruit payroll staff effectively? Please don't give up on your recruitment project just yet. Here at JGA Payroll Recruitment, we appreciate the difficulties associated with attracting, recruiting, and retaining top payroll talent. We also understand just how costly a poor payroll hire can be. JGA Recruitment are a niche payroll recruitment agency who will partner with you to resource payroll candidates who will improve both the accuracy and efficiency of your payroll department. Contact us today on 01727 800 377 or visit jgarecruitment.com to find out more.
We actually have some of our clients that are at the point where they have automated the entire payroll from start to finish, and it will, particularly for if they've got salary payrolls or director pays. If you go back to what I was saying before, the reason why a lot of payroll professionals aren't able to go on holidays is not because the actual payroll process itself is a problem. It's usually something that happens much earlier in the process. So a client doesn't get their timesheets in on time, or they've got a bunch of last-minute adjustments. And if we can automate those parts, which are the things that could have kind of delay the process down the track, or other time-consuming parts of getting the data into the system, what it means is that when it comes to the time where they're actually processing payroll, is exactly like you said before, they're providing value, and it's their years of experience and their ability to problem solve quickly that allows those payrolls to get processed in a timely fashion. So we do have clients that are at the point where they can process everything. But I think the other thing that it does is it makes it easier for payroll professionals to put processes in place that are easier to replicate and easier for them to then hand off to other people, so that they don't become, the key man in those scenarios and don't feel like they can't take a break. So it just enables them to have a lot more confidence that the issues that will arise are far fewer and more of an exception type nature than, every week we don't know how to upload a CSV file because a format's changed, or, the client's done something strange with Excel and those types of issues, which tend to be the ones that take the time and cause the most stress.
Yeah, well, hopefully a lot of people are excited to hear this, because I think there's a lot of people in the payroll industry that need to take a break. So, get your things automated, get that bit managed, work out in your process where you need to automate. Perhaps you can take that much needed break. Hopefully people listening to this can take advantage. Fingers crossed.
The other benefit of being in the cloud is that you can have the flexibility to do both. We've had
log in while you're away. Yeah.
So they'll or go away for extended period of time. They'll spend 3 months in Spain or in Portugal. They'll log in. The data's all still hosted in the UK. It all still lives in the UK. It's not moving outside of out of the UK or EU. And so they get the best of both worlds. They can actually not just take a break, but completely restyle their lifestyle around it. Sure.
And actually, we're seeing that, right? Post-pandemic, we now know payroll can do it remotely. So why not do it from the beachy shores of Spain or somewhere else? If it can be done, why not? So that's quite interesting to know. You talked about compliance. So you've got a compliance team that stays up to speed, that work around the clock to make sure things change. We've got a new Prime Minister here in the UK, Liz Truss. I wondered how that's impacting the world of payroll from your perspective. What are the things you need to consider when something like a political party changes, or how much does this change the way that you have to work behind the scenes as a software provider?
Yeah, so I think our payroll compliance team have gone through 3 sets of hair at the moment with trying to understand the changes. I think one of the interesting things about the UK is I'm probably the only person that will come up here and say I actually think HMRC, the software development team, they actually do a fantastic job of getting the information that software developers need out to software developers in a timely fashion, because they're everything that we do kind of relies on them providing the information for us to build the system on top of. There's a lot of people that are probably sitting, listening to the podcast, saying they don't agree, but trust me, when you've worked with other jurisdictions and you see how those updates get delivered, sometimes after the due date, you actually realise what a great job that the software team within the HMRC does. But governments changing, even leaders within parties changing, and then broader macroeconomic conditions changing. They're constantly keeping us on our toes. I think with this government in particular, I think there's been a specific focus on tax changes and tax reforms, and I think the big challenge that our teams are dealing with at the moment is the uncertainty as to what is actually going to go ahead and what's not. We think it might have settled now, so we've got fingers crossed that it will. My payroll team will probably kill me for saying this. I actually think it's much tougher on the payroll professionals than it is on the software developers, because we have very specific guidelines that we have to work with, but implementing and interpreting that as a payroll professional for your clients, and then being on top of that and rolling it out as someone that's processing it, oftentimes as that legislation, because we often get that before the rest of the industry does. That is really tough, because at the end of the day, I don't process the payroll. Our team doesn't process the payroll. It's our clients do, and I think that is a much tougher situation to be in. And it's always fascinating to see how well the payroll profession does as a whole when these types of changes come in, because I don't think people realise that the process of going from the Prime Minister saying, hey, we're going to implement some tax changes or roll some tax changes back, to then people getting paid usually happens fairly smoothly, and the reason it happens is because of the fantastic people that work in payroll, and I often think they don't get enough credit for that.
Hey, shout out to His Majesty's Revenue and Customs today on the show. Don't hear that very often, but hey, if it's true and it's worthwhile, why not? So one question I'd like to ask, but I'd like to almost the cardinal sin of a podcast. I'm going to ask you almost 2 questions in one. The first is, what are the innovations that KeyPay are working on now to sort of keep yourselves ahead of the curve that perhaps the payroll community may not be aware is coming in the industry? Maybe that's near term future, but also how do you see the future of payroll evolving over the longer term, say the next 5 or 10 years?
Yeah, it's something that we think about a lot, not just ourselves, but our parent company, Employment Hero. We ask this question a lot, is, what does payroll look like in 10 years? And I have a view that we've sort of spent the last 10 years building software to take our manual processes and the things that we were doing on paper 10 years ago, and we've now replicated them in the cloud. And that's fantastic. That's great progress. But what I really get excited about is what we're able to now do, that we've digitized those processes, is actually transform how payroll is done for the next 10 years. There's 1,000 different ways that will take shape. But the thing that I really like to focus on and really think about is how do we benefit the employee in this process? So we spend a lot of time talking about the employers and the impact to the payroll professional, but we don't often spend a lot of time talking about the impact that payroll has on the employee, because when you think about payroll, what it is it's actually there to serve the employee. It's to give the employee their money. And I think what we're able to do with the systems and the technology in place is really change the way that employees interact with payroll and, ultimately their financial health. So, and a really simple example of that is accessing wages before they're paid. We like to think of being able to not just facilitating that, but taking it one step further. So the way that it works at the moment is an employer tells an employee when their payday is. We like to think about, what would it look like if when an employee signs up and they go through their onboarding and they're filling out their forms, they tell their employer when they would like to get paid. And it might be on a weekly cycle or a fortnightly cycle or a monthly cycle, or it might be on an ad hoc basis. But it's flipping the conversation around to say, hey, it's the employees' funds that we're ultimately talking about. So what can we do from a technology perspective to enable that type of change in the industry? And I think that's just one very small example, but it's the kind of thing that we're now able to start thinking about, which 10 years ago we weren't able to because we didn't have the frameworks in place. So I kind of feel like we've spent 10 years to get to the starting line. Now we're at the starting line. We can spend the next 10 years, building what happens next.
I think that's generally a really interesting response. So obviously, I think every software provider I've had on the show tends to bring up pay on demand somewhere in the conversation. Right? We know this is an innovative thing, particularly in the UK. We're still a little bit slow to adopt. But if I understand that correctly, and do correct me if I'm wrong on this, it sounds to me like it's a slightly different way that you're approaching it. It's rather than just offering pay on demand as it used to exist. It's someone who comes into the business can pick the cycle they want to be paid on. So if I want to be paid weekly or hourly or daily or monthly or bi-weekly, that's kind of a choice I can make, and then I can probably change that choice. But actually, that's a really nice way of approaching it. It's not about trying to get access to money in short-term ways that perhaps people consider pay on demand to be all about. It's actually just having a choice about the cycle that you want to be paid on. I think that's really intuitive, and I think that's really interesting as a concept that I haven't really come across. Other providers may offer it, but I haven't come across that as part of a conversation piece that I've had yet. And I think that's really interesting and innovative. And I think on the back of that, my question would be then, in the UK, we're quite fixed on our monthly pay cycles in particular. Long term, the next 10 years, as this technology gets adopted and people are more familiar with it, do you see the dissolution of the monthly pay cycle in the UK starting to occur? Do you think that will start to disappear over time, or do you think actually routine will still hold out long term?
Yeah, I would love to see the concept of a pay cycle itself just disappear entirely. Yeah, we think about it in pay cycles because that's how historically it had to work. If we keep thinking about things in that way, we'll actually stop the advancements that we need to do to enable solutions that, there will be things that happen in 10 years' time that we haven't thought of by now. But if we keep coming back to the old payroll thinking of we have to have a monthly pay cycle, we'll never unlock those solutions. So it's not going to just be dictated by the technology. I think also if you look at how employees are choosing to work, there's a whole range of opportunities. If you're looking at, you ask any business owner about the struggles to get labour at the moment, and it's a big problem across not just the UK, Australia, New Zealand. It's a huge challenge. And so, one of the things that we'd love to be able to facilitate is for employees to work in multiple full organisations, and rather than having a payday or a pay cycle that they're assigned to, as soon as they finish their shift, that shift gets approved and the funds are paid directly into their account, and the taxes are withheld properly, the NI is withheld properly, the pension's all calculated for them, and it's happening on a shift by shift basis. So they're thinking less about when is payday and more about how do I manage this stream of money that's coming into my account. So I think there's some really exciting opportunities there. It'll take lots of different shapes and forms, but as technology providers, I feel like we have a big responsibility to enable that for the future employees.
Fantastic. So my last question before we open the vault, Phil, is this. So let's assume I'm a payroll manager, right? I'm listening to this show right now. I'm going through an RFP. I've picked 3 or 4 payroll suppliers that I want to pitch to me from a new solution. I've just listened to this. I thought, KeyPay sounds interesting. Not one I'd considered before, not one I'd heard of before. What's the quick pitch that would perhaps encourage a payroll professional to go, actually, maybe I need to consider KeyPay as well as one of my solution providers?
The reality is that we are the number one cloud-based payroll provider in Australia, UK, and soon to be other regions. And what makes us different is we think cloud first. So we aren't just trying to take desktop systems and replicate those processes in the cloud. We're actually thinking about how do we transform payroll through the cloud. So that would be my 30-second pitch.
Perfect. But listen, let's open the vault.
Entering the vault.
One piece of advice you would give to someone working in payroll right now?
Think about not just what's happening today. Think about what the opportunities are down the track, and think about how do you go from where that is now to where those opportunities are, and always be working with your eyes open and looking down the track. Because one thing I can guarantee is what we're doing today is not what we'll be doing in 5 or 10 years' time, and we need to be thinking about that now so that we're ready to capitalise on down the track.
Yeah, great response. Couldn't agree more.
And really learn how pensions work.
Yeah, no, absolutely right. Absolutely right. We've got a new pensions minister as well. So changing here in the UK all the time. We'll wait and see what that brings. If you had the power of foresight and could change the entire payroll industry with one action or one improvement, what would that action or improvement be?
I think I'd go back to the one I said before, which is to get rid of the monthly pay cycle and move it from being a fixed monthly pay cycle to more a stream pay run process.
Nice. I think that's going to happen. So watch this space. And last but not least, if payroll were a song or a film, what song or film would it be and why?
Oh, that is a good question. If payroll was a song or a film, I think it would be Risky Business.
Nice.
Tom Cruise. Yeah.
Firstly, well, listen, Phil Burney, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on the show today. For those that do want to find out more, please do go to keypay.co.uk. All the links will be in the show notes, so you don't need to fiddle around on Google. Just click to the show notes of the episode and we can take you straight through. I'll put a link on there as well to Phil's LinkedIn profile for those who want to connect and discuss the future of payroll or the future of automation with Phil in more detail. Please do take the opportunity. And I'll put a link to the KeyPay blog, which is a wonderful blog as well, all about the world of international payroll. So keep an eye on that as well. Is there anywhere else you'd like to direct traffic to, Phil, that may be useful for people to connect?
No, I think you've covered it all, Nick, and I just want to say thanks for having us, and it's been great having a chat. Good fun.
Yeah, no, fantastic. Well, we've been connected for a number of years, so really like to have you on the show, Phil. And of course, if you are a payroll leader listening to this podcast, you need support with a payroll-related vacancy. You heard it from Phil here. Talent is in short supply. That's what we do. We specialise in finding hard-to-reach payroll talent internationally across all levels, across 60 different career pathways, payroll implementation, payroll management, payroll sales, whatever it might be. So if you need support with a payroll vacancy, please do get in touch with either myself or any of my wonderful team at JGA Recruitment. You can access us at jgarecruitment.com or drop me a personal email at nick@jjrecruitment.com as well. Just leave me say a huge thank you to all of you for listening to the show today. Please do share it with all your colleagues, friends, family, and anyone else you think that might be interested in the world of payroll. We can raise the profile of the industry together. I look forward to bringing you the next episode of the Payroll Podcast real soon. Thanks once again, Phil Burney, for joining me today. Thank you.
Thanks, Nick.
Thank you so much for tuning into the Payroll Podcast with Nick Day of JGA Recruitment. If you need help with a current payroll vacancy, then please get in touch with Nick and his team. All contact details can be found in the episode notes. In the meantime, to make sure you never miss a future episode, please subscribe to the show through any of your favourite podcast channels. Till next time.